We live in this profoundly paradoxical era, don't we? I mean, you look around and we can literally map the human genome. We routinely cure diseases that, just a few generations ago would wipe out entire cities.
Right, and we have orbital telescopes looking at the very edge of the known universe.
Exactly. But then when it comes to the literal, single, inescapable, absolute certainty of human existence, which is death, we completely banish it. We hide it away in these sterile hospital rooms and quiet care facilities.
Yeah, we build our entire daily routine around this, like, unspoken illusion of immortality.
We really do. But what if we've just been looking at this all wrong? What if death isn't, this cold, dark nothingness? Like, what if it's not the absolute end of the book?
Well, that's the big question.
Right. What if everything you and I are doing right now today is actually just the preface to a much, much larger story? So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a highly detailed 1400-year-old roadmap of the soul that pretty much completely upends how we view the afterlife.
And before we get deep into the actual mechanics of this, I
Yeah.
do want to establish a really clear baseline for you, the listener. We're unpacking Islamic theology today, yes, but the goal of this conversation is definitely not to preach or, endorse these viewpoints as absolute objective truth.
Right. No missionary work here.
Exactly. We're here to impartially explore what is honestly a fascinating framework. And what makes this specific perspective so compelling is how it systematically triangulates spiritual wisdom, philosophical logic, and modern scientific parallels into this really highly cohesive system.
Yeah, and to even start to understand what happens after a physical death, this framework basically demands that we first completely redefine what the mind actually is. Because if you strip away the biology, you run straight into a wall, what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness.
Yeah, coined by the philosopher David Chalmers. The hard problem asks basically an impossible question. If your brain is really just a collection of biological machinery like atoms, neurons, electrical impulses,
The
neurochemicals.
wetware, right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
How does that physical stuff actually produce the profoundly subjective experience of being you? Like, how do lifeless mechanical cells create the visceral feeling of, say, deep grief or the sheer awe of falling in love?
Or even just a continuous sense of identity over decades, right? Even though, like, almost every physical cell in your body has been replaced since you were a kid.
Exactly. The classic materialistic view just assumes the brain produces consciousness the way a salivary gland produces saliva.
Like, it's just a biological byproduct.
Yeah, but modern physics and philosophy are increasingly pushing back hard against that. A lot of progressive thinkers are exploring panpsychism.
And to translate that a bit for anyone who hasn't gone down that specific rabbit hole, panpsychism proposes that consciousness isn't an accidental byproduct of biology at all. It's actually a fundamental property of the universe, kind of like gravity or mass.
Right. And in that dualistic model, the brain functions a lot more like a highly complex quantum radio receiver. It doesn't actually generate the music. It just picks up filters and translates a non-local signal, which is your consciousness, into this three-dimensional physical reality we're in right now.
I love that analogy because if you take a hammer and you just smash a physical radio into tiny pieces, the music in the room undeniably stops.
It stops completely.
But the signal itself, the actual frequency carrying the symphony, that remains completely untouched. It still exists in the atmosphere.
Yes. And there is this very specific, really beautiful linguistic detail in the theology that perfectly mirrors this radio analogy. It never actually says that the soul dies or that the soul is destroyed.
Right, the phrasing is incredibly precise. It says, every soul shall taste death.
Which is such a profound distinction. Tasting death implies a total separation between the subject and the event.
Yeah, think about the pure logic of that metaphor. If you take a bite of an apple and you taste it, you are inherently not the apple. You're the taster. You're a separate entity experiencing an object from the outside.
And crucially, the taster survives the act of tasting.
Exactly. In this framework, death isn't the cessation of your existence. It's a phase transition. You are just dropping a dense physical veil.
And to help us intuitively grasp that transition, the perspective presents sleep as the little brother of death.
Oh, that's such a great way to frame it.
Right, because every single night, your consciousness temporarily shifts away from your biological hardware. You enter a dream state where you see, you hear, you feel intensely, all without actually using your physical eyes or your central nervous system.
It's wild when you think about it.
It is. You remain tethered to your physical form by this sort of energetic thread. When you wake up, that consciousness snaps right back into the biological receiver.
So death is simply the singular moment that the tether is permanently cut. The signal just stops routing through the physical receiver.
Exactly. That's a phase transition.
But I do wonder if this framework relies on such complex metaphysics like the mind as a separate frequency and phase transitions and this whole different understanding of consciousness. Why didn't the earliest human religions talk about it this way?
That's a really good question.
Because if you look at the afterlife in ancient traditions, it's usually described as this, I don't know, cloudy, shadowy underworld. It's not usually framed as a complex quantum system.
Well, this specific perspective actually accounts for that discrepancy by viewing human history through the lens of spiritual evolution. It frames itself as basically a final update in a long, continuous line of divine revelations.
Like a software patch for humanity.
Yeah, a divine update. The underlying concept is that humanity was given messages tailored to our collective maturity at any given era. So early revelations, like the Torah, they were highly focused on earthly survival, building a just society, laying down strict legal boundaries.
Which makes total sense. A nomadic desert tribe needed pragmatic rules for survival way more than they needed abstract metaphysics about the soul's quantum journey.
Right, the afterlife was acknowledged, but it was kept pretty vague. You give humanity the curriculum they are actually ready for.
And then, as humanity matures, the curriculum advances.
Exactly. Centuries later, the gospel, the message of Jesus, brings this massive influx of grace, a focus on unconditional love, and a much clearer picture of resurrection. Humanity was finally ready for a deeper emotional and spiritual layer.
But, and this is where this framework gets really interesting, it argues that over subsequent centuries, that pure original message was heavily overlaid with human-made institutional dogmas.
Yes, it points to things like the introduction of original sin or the medieval monetization of purgatory, where salvation could literally be purchased from the church through indulgences.
Which is wild. So this final 1,400-year-old text serves as a master reset. It wipes the hard drive of all those human additions. And to me, the most radical part of that reset is the restoration of absolute personal responsibility through the concept of fitra.
Fitra, yes.
It's the belief that every single human being is born entirely pure. You arrive with an intact internal compass pointing directly toward the Creator. You aren't carrying the spiritual debt of some ancient original sin committed by ancestors you obviously never met.
And there is immense empowerment in that clean slate. Think about it. There is no middleman, no priest, no rigid hierarchy standing between you and the divine. You own your spiritual trajectory.
But that ultimate freedom also means ultimate responsibility. If there's no institution to absolve you at the end, then the moment of death becomes the ultimate solo flight, which takes us straight into the inescapable, deeply individual journey of the transition itself, known as Sakarat al-Maut.
And this transition is not portrayed as a gentle, quiet fading to black. It is described as a hyper-real, ontological event.
Ontological?
Meaning a fundamental shift in the very nature of your reality. Angels literally step in from an unseen dimension to extract the soul from the physical body.
The visceral analogies they use to describe this extraction are just stunning. Like, for a pure soul, someone who lived with humility, generosity, harmony, the soul slips out of the physical body as effortlessly as a single drop of water falling from the spout of a leather flask.
It's a smooth, entirely natural release.
Right. But I have to push back on the other side of that coin because the imagery there is intense. What about someone who completely tethered their entire identity to the material world? The text says pulling the soul of a deeply materialistic, ego-driven person is like violently ripping a thorny branch out of wet, tangled wool.
Yeah, it sounds brutal on the surface. I mean, really brutal.
It really does.
But the underlying mechanics reveal that this isn't like a vindictive creator exacting sadistic revenge on a bad person. It is simply the natural physics of the soul. Well, if you spend your entire existence falsely identifying only with your physical body, your bank account, your social status, you are unnaturally clinging to a temporary illusion. Ripping a thorny branch from wet wool destroys the wool because the fibers are so deeply, intricately tangled around the thorns.
Oh, wow. So the agony of death for the ego-driven soul is literally just the intense friction of being torn away from a world it stubbornly refuses to let go of.
Exactly. It's the resistance that causes the pain, not an external punishment. And what's really fascinating is how this 1,400-year-old theology lines up in astonishing ways with modern near-death experience research.
Oh, totally. Clinical researchers like Dr. Sam Parnia and Dr. Pim van Lommel have gathered thousands of cases of people who flatline, register absolutely zero brain activity, and are subsequently resuscitated.
And the cross-cultural consistency of those reports is just remarkable. Patients who leave their bodies consistently describe a 360-degree razor-sharp awareness. They watch their own surgical resuscitations from the ceiling with perfect clarity.
Even people who were blind from birth report seeing these details.
Yes. And they experience traveling through a dark tunnel toward a warm magnetic light. It mirrors the description of transitioning from the dense physical world into an unseen dimension perfectly.
But the detail in those clinical reports that truly, I think, demands our attention is the life review. In these near-death experiences, people don't just watch a movie of their life on a screen. They experience this hyper-real empathy mirror.
The empathy mirror is such a profound concept.
Right. Imagine, for instance, a conversation you had with a family member this morning. In this empathy mirror, you don't just remember what you said. You physically and emotionally feel the exact sting of the sarcastic comment you made, but completely from their perspective.
You experience the joy or the humiliation you caused others, as if it were happening directly to you.
Yes. And that phenomenon aligns flawlessly with the theological concept of huquat alibar, which translates to the rights of creations.
Right. And this belief states that out of infinite mercy, the Creator might easily forgive the spiritual sins you commit directly against Him. But if you wrong another living creature, that debt cannot simply be erased by divine decree.
Because the universe demands balance.
Exactly. You have to answer to the victim. The empathy mirror reported in modern medical settings really suggests that this cosmic accountability isn't just an abstract moral theory. It is the fundamental reality waiting at the end of the line.
Okay, so let's follow the timeline here. The physical tether is cut, the soul is extracted, the empathy mirror flashes. But if you die today, and the physical universe isn't scheduled to end for another, 4 billion years, your consciousness can't just be floating in an empty void for eons. There has to be some sort of staging area, right?
There is. It's a barrier dimension known as Barzakh. And the overarching metaphor used to describe Barzakh is two giant seas, one sweet water, one salt water flowing directly beside each other. A divine barrier prevents them from ever mixing.
So it's basically a parallel dimension layered directly on top of our own earthly reality.
Yes, exactly. We could be walking through a cemetery right now, completely blind to the massive, complex reality occurring mere inches below us.
And the physics of that dimension are completely alien to us. Time operates relativistically, much like it does when you are deep in a dream state. For a pure soul, waiting thousands of earthly years for the end of the universe might subjectively feel like a short, peaceful afternoon nap.
But before anyone gets to take that relativistic nap, there is an initiation process. The grave questioning.
Here we go.
Two intensely intimidating angels, Munkar and Nakir, approach the newly transitioned soul and ask three deceptively simple questions. Who's your Lord? What is your religion? And who is this prophet?
Okay, when I first encountered this, I was incredibly skeptical. I'm not going to lie. It sounds exactly like an ancient pop quiz. Like, couldn't a terrible, highly manipulative person just memorize the Arabic flashcards before they die and game the system?
It's a fair question. That skepticism makes total sense from a materialistic viewpoint. But it completely ignores the psychological reality of Barzakh. In that dimension, you no longer possess your biological brain.
Right. You don't have the prefrontal cortex you previously used to rationalize, lie, manipulate, or, play semantics.
Exactly. Your true distilled essence is the only thing left to speak. It's essentially spiritual muscle memory. You cannot cram for a test if the test is a biological reflex.
That makes so much sense. If you practice swinging a baseball bat every single day of your life, your muscles just know what to do when a pitch comes. You don't think about it.
Yeah, and if you spend your entire life genuinely worshiping money or power or social media validation, your spiritual reflex is locked onto those things. You will be physically and spiritually paralyzed. Your tongue will simply refuse to form the word Allah.
Wow. So the questioning is not a verbal examination at all. It is an involuntary, honest manifestation of the ultimate priorities you built your entire life around.
Precisely. And if your true essence aligns with harmony and the Creator, your perception of that waiting room expands as far as the eye can see, and a window to paradise opens. But if your life was built on cruelty and narrow selfishness, your internal spiritual constriction becomes your external reality. The dimensional walls literally close in on you.
That is terrifying, honestly. But okay, so millions of souls enter this sleep state, waiting in Barzakh. Eventually, something has to wake them up. The system has to reboot. Which brings us to Al-Qiyamah, the cosmic resurrection.
The sounding of the horn, the folding of space-time, and the total unmaking and remaking of the universe.
This is the ultimate culmination. And there's a profound intersection with modern science here that I just find mind-blowing. In ancient times, skeptics used to mock the very idea of physical resurrection. They would literally grind old bones into dust, scatter it in the wind, and ask how dust could possibly be brought back to life.
And the response they got was incredibly specific. The theology stated, "We are able to perfectly restore even their fingertips."
The fingerprint, the ultimate biological symbol of unique identity. To an ancient desert dweller, restoring scattered dust sounded like an impossible magic trick. But from the perspective of modern genetics and information theory, it is entirely logical. You only need a microscopic strand of DNA data to rebuild an entire biological structure.
And quantum physics takes this even further with the no-hiding theorem.
Oh, I love this part.
It's fascinating. This theorem dictates that in a quantum system, information is never truly destroyed. It simply changes state or becomes entangled with the environment. So if an omniscient creator holds the ultimate cosmic backup on a master hard drive, downloading that exact quantum information into a new, imperishable physical form is mathematically sound.
It's basically a cosmic cloud backup.
Yeah. The theology even points to a specific physical anchor point, the tailbone, or Ajab el-Danab, from which the new imperishable body grows, much like these steeds sprouting after a heavy rain.
Okay, so a cosmic backup is downloaded into a new imperishable body. Once that resurrection happens, we arrive at the mizan, the divine scale. And what is so striking to me about this scale is its absolute microscopic demand for justice. It doesn't weigh the sheer quantity of your actions, it weighs your naya.
Your innermost intention. The scale measures the density of your sincerity. Imagine a billionaire who donates $10 million to a hospital, but does so entirely for public relations, tax write-offs, and social clout. On the mizan, that monumental financial deed weighs like a speck of dust.
Because the intention was empty.
Right. But conversely, imagine a person who is actively starving, who gives away half of a dried date out of pure empathy for someone else. That microscopic action weighs heavier than a mountain.
The framework insists that absolute justice is the final law of reality. Not a single tear of the oppressed throughout billions of years of human history goes forgotten or unavenged.
And once those scales are perfectly balanced, the souls move to their eternal destinations. And this is where we desperately need to redefine the concept of hell or Jahannam.
Yes, please. Because pop culture has ingrained this cartoonish image of pitchforks, fire, and an angry deity gleefully torturing people forever.
And that image is a fundamental corruption of the theology. In this framework, hell is not a torture chamber run by a vindictive God who demands punishment. God doesn't need to punish anyone. Hell is far better understood as a cosmic hospital.
A hospital?
Yeah, it's a severe spiritual intensive care unit. It's designed to violently burn away the false ego and the spiritual diseases a person absolutely refused to cure during their life.
The metaphor of the Zakrun tree illustrates this perfectly, I think. It is a tree that grows at the bottom of hell, and its bitter fruit boils in the stomachs of the inhabitants. But the tree isn't an arbitrary creative punishment handed down by a judge.
No, it's not.
The tree is the direct manifestation of the toxic seeds we plant in our own hearts while we are alive. Every act of envy, malice, greed, it plants a seed. You cultivate those seeds on earth, and in the afterlife, you are simply forced to consume the horrific harvest you grew yourself.
The agony of hell is basically the ultimate, inescapable pain of regret and self-realization. But embedded deep within this terrifying prospect is a really profound note of hope. The theology explicitly states that the Creator's mercy ultimately outpaces his wrath.
That's a crucial point.
It is. A famous tradition notes that anyone who possesses even a mustard seed of true faith and goodness in their heart will eventually be rehabilitated. The false ego will burn away and they will be brought out. It is a mechanism of necessary purification, not eternal sadism for every flawed human.
And after the purification, or for those who pass the scale immediately, the destination is heaven, Jana. And again, we really have to throw away the boring, static image of sitting on a fluffy cloud playing a harp for 10 trillion years.
Oh, absolutely. Jana is described as a space of dynamic quantum expansion. The heavy illusion of physical and emotional separation is entirely eradicated.
There's no biological decay, no emotional trauma, no envy.
None of it. It is a hyperstate where your consciousness is perfectly aligned with the fabric of reality, allowing your thoughts to instantly manifest.
Yet, even with all the vivid descriptions of infinite gardens and rivers, the theology insists that the ultimate peak of paradise has absolutely nothing to do with physical or environmental pleasure. The absolute pinnacle is called Ruyatullah.
Seeing the face of God. It is the moment the final ultimate veil drops. The intellectual and spiritual ecstasy of directly experiencing the source of all creation is described as being so overwhelming, so absolute, that it instantly makes every other magnificent pleasure of paradise pale in comparison.
Wow.
Imagine a person who's been blind since birth seeing a brilliant sunrise for the very first time, and then multiply that awe by infinity. The soul finally truly returns home.
Taking all of these massive mind-bending cosmic scales into account, a very natural question arises for you, the listener. If the timeline of existence is eternal and this physical world is just a temporary receiver for our consciousness, why should you care about paying your taxes
Yeah.
or fixing a pothole in your street or building a career? Doesn't a cosmic timeline render earthly life completely irrelevant?
It might seem that way at first glance, but the framework argues the exact opposite. The realization of eternity isn't an excuse for earthly apathy. It is the ultimate call to immediate action. There is a strategic formula highlighted in the tradition. Use 5 things before 5 things.
Use your life before your death, your health before your illness, your free time before you become busy, your wealth before your poverty, and your youth before your old age.
Exactly. Earth is the critical planting ground. You don't bother building a permanent stone mansion under a tree where you are only resting for a single hour, but you absolutely must use that hour to plant the seeds you will need to eat for the rest of the journey.
Because the afterlife doesn't magically start when the heart monitor flatlines. It is being built right now. It is actively forming in how you speak to a stress cashier, how you support your family, how you handle a professional setback.
That is exactly why the daily practice of self-accounting is so central to this worldview. If you objectively assess your own actions and intentions every single night before you go to sleep, which remember is the little brother of death, you are constantly course correcting. You are untangling the wet wool before it hardens.
And if you do that, you have absolutely nothing to fear when the permanent transition eventually arrives.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. I want to leave you with one concrete thought to carry into the rest of your day. Imagine just for a moment navigating your life this afternoon with the absolute unshakable certainty that your consciousness is immortal. Imagine that an inescapable empathy mirror is actively recording, waiting to make you intimately feel every ounce of pain and joy you have ever caused another living being. If you operated as if that were a hard scientific fact, which of your daily priorities would you completely upend right now? And what exhausting petty grudge would you immediately drop with a knowing smile?